Alright, what's up everybody? So today I'm going to be doing another full walkthrough of a back and tricep workout. So first off, I have to thank anybody that suggested for me to get the Sony ZV-E10. That's the camera I ended up going with. So long story short, I finally got my hands on the camera, found a good deal on eBay, well under the budget that I asked for. It was like $550 or something, which I think is a pretty good deal for what I'm getting here. But for whatever reason, eBay didn't decide to save my current address when I typed it in, so they shipped it to my old apartment. I ended up driving to my old apartment like an hour or two after I got the notification that it delivered, and it wasn't there. So I was like, all right, well, I'm out of luck. There's $500 down the drain. So I was like, all right, what could I possibly try and do to fix my situation? So I put a note. I had like this sticker for the truck that I haven't put on yet, so I took like the paper part off the back and left a little note saying like I basically got a package delivered. Text me, kind of a Hail Mary, and it ended up working. The guy didn't text me for like a couple days, but I got my hands on it, and here we are. So better late than never. It's here. I still don't know how to use the mic on it. I did a trial run, luckily, and the mic didn't end up working, so that would have been a waste of an entire video. Basically, I still have to do my old phone setup, but it is what it is. Let's get into the workout for today. So basically what I've got for today, back and triceps, like I said. The first thing I'm going to be doing is the underhand hammer strength pull downs, the same as I had last time, and I'll just basically go through that same workout. Changed a couple things up specifically for the triceps, and then we'll just get into obviously that towards the end. But I also have a few comments from my last video. I have a few topics I want to touch on anyways, so I'm going to start warming up for this, then we'll dive into some of those questions. Why is my laptop sending me notifications? Alright, workout's pulled up. We are good to go. So let's see if I can set this thing up a little better. So one of the things about getting a new camera, it's like you can't really teach an old dog new tricks. This thing is definitely a little bit more like, or I guess a little bit less user-friendly than my other one, which is the Canon G7X. And this thing's like the biggest thing that's driving me crazy is there's no touchscreen on it, so you have to press a bunch of different buttons to like navigate through all the settings and through like any old clips or anything to like play or pause or fast forward a video, where before I could just take a look at the clip I just filmed and everything would be so much easier, so I could see if the clip was like angled right, if the lighting was good, all that kind of stuff. And now it's just so tedious. I feel like I'm using like one of those old like Blackberries or something from 10 years ago or whatever. Actually, probably longer ago than that at this point. So warm-ups here, same as last time. Nothing crazy, just trying to get a good feel on the lats. Keep my shoulder down, practice a relatively similar technique to what I'm going to be doing in my working sets. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything. Nobody really like tears their lats or anything, so you don't have to be too crazy with it. Then let's hop into the working weight. So 3 plates is typically my go-to on this. I might go a little bit heavier this time, just for the sake of it. I don't really track my weight and reps very closely on back stuff, especially if it's a little bit more short biased. It's just so hard to get a reading on it, and when you get progressions caught up in your head a little bit too much on these, you can kind of start to slowly count stuff that doesn't really count, and it just kind of takes away from your technique. It kind of incentivizes the wrong thing. So with stuff that's like length and biased, or just generally more stable, or just generally strict, I'm fine with it. Preacher curls are a good example. Any pressing movement is another good example. So, you know what? I think my straps are upstairs. Yep. Alright, give me 10 seconds. Off to a good start here. Hey cats. What's up, boys? Yep, here we go. Alright, strap secured. I should probably not make you guys sit through that, so I guess it's more editing work for me. But it is what it is. Alright, so like I was talking about earlier, I don't really have a set number of reps I'm going for. I'm basically just focusing on technique and pushing as hard as I possibly can. Technically pulling, so any smart people in the comments, don't call me out on that. Got the seatbelt on. Let's get it. All right. That is all. Whew. All right, I'll take that. Not terrible. I think I said this last time, but basically, on a lift like this, unilateral, where I'm like, I don't just want to sit here, I'm not going to take off the seatbelt and lose my setup and whatnot. I'll just briefly kind of catch my breath between sets. Whew, and then hop into the next side. For whatever reason, I always do my right side first on this. But I mean, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I guess, if anything, maybe go with your weaker side, but probably doesn't matter too much. I don't really think I have a strength imbalance at all on my lats or anything. All right. I'm not sure if you can see that well from the camera on this lift, but it's so tricky to try and like draw the line of what counts and what doesn't. So it's like on maybe rep 6 I get to here, rep 7's like here, 8 is here, 9 is here, etc. And it's like, it's just so hard to kind of draw that line because there's no clean lockout like there would be on like a press or a preacher curl or something like that. Whew. All right, so one set down there. Gonna do a back off set in a second here. And for any sets that I don't track like the reps for, what I'll end up doing is I'll just put an asterisk in that in the rep cell, so it indicates that I did a set. But obviously I'm not like giving myself a hard number that could be right, could be wrong. So I'll go down 2.5 plates for set number 2. And I know there's a bit of a debate in the comments over whether it's better to like log it as the actual weight on the machine or if it's better to log it as the plates. I'm totally on the plate camp here. It's like, instead of trying to be like, oh, well, it's like 3 45s plus a 25, and this lever weighs like 18.5 pounds, and then I'll add a 2.5, it's like, that's just such a nightmare. 2.5 plates, or 2 plates plus 25. Problem solved. So much easier. I'll never go back to just logging the actual weight itself. Alright, I'm going to load this up, and then I got a good question on the last video that I want to answer. It's one of the worst things about, like, having a smaller home gym. It's not a small home gym, but it's a small space for how much stuff I have. I'm, like, constantly having to maneuver around each thing, so it's like, there'll be, like, this peg here, face level, this one, like chest level, got one here, stomach level, Smith machine, yeah, about eye level, like, that would be fun, right? So, I've gotten pretty good at maneuvering around it, and I'm proud to say, in the 3 years I've had the home gym, I don't think I've ever, like, hurt myself down here, like hitting my head on anything or whatnot. So the question that I wanted to answer up next, let me see. There we go. All right, it's so hard to fit me in the frame after bulking. So this question is from a person named Vera. She says, if you had to abandon barbells and machines entirely and only use less stable options like dumbbells or cables, how would that impact your performance? How important is stability really? So one little bullet point that I put here for myself. Oh yeah, look at that setup. Beautiful, right? It depends on the approach that you take to each set and to your training in general. So what I would say for this question is, you can push some lifts to just basically use the most weight you can while keeping your technique reasonable or just falling into an appropriate rep range. The technique thing isn't as much of a concern for more stable stuff because you have less areas where your technique can falter. So you take something like a preacher curl. The only two things that you can mess up on is range of motion and tempo. So as long as your tempo is like reasonable and as long as your range of motion is standardized, which is pretty straightforward on a preacher curl, I'd say either go for a full stretch or go pretty much all the way as long as you're clearly through peak resistance. Either one of those should work very well for something like a preacher curl. It's pretty hard to mess up. So you can go as heavy as you want because you can't really cheat that movement. So what I would advise here is just go as heavy as you can to where you can still control the weight and have a full range of motion. Like there's nothing else to worry about. So just like when people say chase strength on squat, bench, deadlift, like that mindset is much better applied to something where you have less areas where you can cheat. So maybe a Smith bench or most Smith machine work, a preacher curl. That's a pretty good mindset within reason to take on a lift like that. But I would say on other lifts where you have less stability overall, so something like, say, a barbell squat, people love to say just like move as much weight as you can and just add weight at any cost. But a barbell squat, you can keep adding weight for so long after your technique starts to fall apart. So the thing with squats is there's a spectrum of basically how much each muscle is going to be involved. So obviously there's a continuum with, say, like a knee flexion to a hip hinge. And if you want to just get the most quads that you can out of a squat, you want to be generally closer to the biasing, like completely biasing knee flexion that you can out of that squat. And you can keep going heavier and it will still classify as a squat, but it will slowly turn into a hip hinge. So for something that's less stable, I know you didn't mention barbells as less stable, but for something like a barbell squat, it's kind of the perfect example for the question you're asking here. Something like that, I would reserve going all out in terms of weight on. I would use like a rep goal system or just a regular double progression on something like that. That way you can keep your technique within reason and you can maximize your sets from there. Versus something like a preacher curl, you can slap on weight very easily. You literally only have to watch your range of motion and kind of your tempo. And other than that, you're just locked in. There's nothing to really think about. So it basically depends on your approach. I would say something where, like that barbell squat example, it's a good time to get more out of less weight. That's not an excuse to like not train hard or just never add weight, because of course if you're growing, you just straight up have to add weight or else the stimulus isn't going to be able to match the amount of muscle that you have. So the basically, long story short, everything's kind of on a spectrum in lifting and with unstable lifts. So I would take less of a add weight at any cost approach on less stable stuff, and I'd take more of a kind of more along the lines of like get more at a less weight and maximize range of motion, etc. So let's get the final set on here, this little back off, and then we'll get into some fun topics and some more good lifts too. Oh. This might be getting a little bit too light. I probably should have gone up a little bit on this back off too, huh? Whew. It's also like, it's the most beautiful day outside, and I'm just spending it in like this cold, dark basement. It's a Friday afternoon. It's like 4 p.m. on a Friday. 73 and sunny. I should be like out camping or on the kayak or something, but here we are. All right, that's it on there. It's so frustrating on this. It's like, I feel like when I when I do my pull down, it's like, I try and get a good range of motion, but my like giant triceps just kind of get in the way, and it's just like, you just run out of space. It's so frustrating. All right, so T-bar rows up next. And then, ooh, this is a juicy topic too. So I've mentioned this before, but people like to point out that I have a higher body fat percentage. So I have another little bit of a topic here that I think would be helpful. Let's see. This is the one thing I hate most about this camera, if there's anything that I do hate about it. It is the like screen. Obviously, you're not going to be able to see it in this video, but there's the little screen so I can like see myself. It's to the side instead of above, and you have to like twist it in all these weird kind of ways. I'm just not a fan of it. So I'm still getting used to like setting it up and angling it properly and everything. How's this? That looks fine. Probably a little high, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna hit a little warm-up set, then let's talk about bulking, body fat percentage, all that kind of stuff. This isn't too intensive a topic, but something that I think is worth talking about. And let's get this out of the way again. And set up a little early for reverse pec deck, which will be up, not next, but the lift after, if you remember this session. So basically, when it comes to bulking and all that kind of stuff, it's like, somebody asked, like, how do we actually know that you're jacked and you're not just like some fat guy? And my answer to that is, I've been lean before. So the way to know if you have built any muscle, or the way to tell like how big you actually are, I guess, is to see how you look when you're lean, and then compare yourself at the same body fat percentage or at the same body weight to your performance in the gym, your measurements, all that kind of stuff. So I guess to expand on that, if I compare, say, my measurements to, let's see if I can get this set up properly. It's a little tedious. How's that? Not great. There we go. Why is it so high? I have to like lower this tripod or something. It's making me feel really short. Like, I can't let like a camera one-up me like that. Oh, this is a nightmare. This thing is so tilted. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. So, what was I saying? Okay, so basically, The way I can tell that I have built muscle is because if you look at things like my performance in the gym, my measurements, all that kind of stuff, the last time I was at a peak bulk, my arms were a little under 16 and a half inches. And this is during my power building days. I was squatting and deadlifting, obviously much more than I would now because I don't train those lifts anymore, or anything where I can get an accurate comparison. I just do hack squats and RDLs now. But when it comes to bench, I actually did max out on bench back in, I think, January, and like an untrained bench. I haven't done bench in 5 years, and I still managed to hit 350 with probably a couple reps in the tank. It moved really quick, and that's without benching for 5 years. So it's like, if from one peak bulk, when I'm hyper specializing in bench with hyper optimized technique, and I can barely get up 330 on like one peaked day when I'm trying my best to get a 1 rep max, versus just like some random day when I'd already lifted earlier and I just go down and just kind of send 350, like that's an obvious indicator of progress. And if there was like a major difference in body weight or something like that, then sure, that can maybe make up a bit of a difference. But when I'm not that much heavier than I was back then, I was probably, I actually don't remember my exact body weight. I was probably mid 180s, and then when I hit this I was like 195, so a clear jump in strength. If you compare my Smith bench numbers to what I was roughly benching back then, the lifts are comparable enough. My numbers now, I'm Smith benching, what was it? It was 325 for 6 or 7. Like, yeah, I mean, there's no chance that I could have done anything close to that. I never even hit 315 for 2 on a barbell back then. So it's an obvious sign of progress. And when I look at like how I looked when I was lean last time, I looked fairly big. Like, I had a good but not great physique. You guys have all seen those videos before. And now it's like, if I compare my measurements from that bulk to what I was at before going on that cut, my measurements are much higher on my bulk. So it's safe to say that if my arms are 16 and a half peak bulk back then, and I'm overall just like bigger and heavier without being much higher of a body fat percentage now, and my arms are over 1.5 inches bigger, it's a good sign of progress. And then you take my bench, for example, that's a very comparable lift from then to now, even though it's Smith machine versus a barbell back then. It's an obvious sign of progress. So I think if I was to cut down, I'd look much bigger this time than I did back then. Obviously, it's not going to be like a revolutionary, like crazy change. I mean, it's going to be significant within like the confines of being natural. So if you're looking at just a natural transformation, it would be pretty sick. But if you try and compare that to like going from natural to enhanced or something, like what you would maybe normally see in a fitness transformation video, it's probably not going to be quite that. But for a natural, I think I've done probably the best I could have done in this time frame realistically. So let's hop into a set of T-bar rows. Let me try and set this thing up so you can actually see it. There we go. Yeah, it's going to take a while to get used to this camera, the setup, the zoom, all that kind of stuff. So a little bit heavier this time, 4 plates and a 10. Last time I was just doing 4 plates. So it's a little bit heavier, and this is just, I really have to get a new T-bar row machine. I mean, this thing really just tries to pull you forwards. It's so frustrating. It's like, I honestly don't think I'd be able to lift like 4.5 plates on this thing without it pulling me forwards as I'm raising it off the floor. So major emphasis here on scapular movement, protraction and retraction. This isn't for the lats, this isn't for the spinal erectors, this isn't for the biceps, it's not for the grip. It's all for the traps. You're rowing for the traps. How far your hands move doesn't matter. How far the bar moves doesn't matter. It's all about how much your scaps and your traps move. That is by far the most important factor. If you're doing length and partials and your scaps aren't retracting at all, they're just staying in an isometric position, you're not getting much out of the lift. So it's all about that. Forget about everything else. That is all. That's a tough one. So you'll see at the end, those partials there, the bar, my hands, not moving a whole ton, but watch my shoulders and my scaps. They're still moving. And that's where you can get more beyond quote-unquote failure. Whew. Yep, those will leave you out of breath. So enjoy the breathing, and I'll read off some of these next topics. See what we got to go over. Oh, maybe now's a good time. So, a lot's changed in hockey, eh? So, since my last video, basically, I was sitting here. I think I was in the same little pec deck here. Oh, I hate the screen on this. This is going to drive me nuts, but it is what it is. The rest of this camera's great. So, if we're talking hockey, I was sitting here like an idiot last time saying, oh, the Oilers are toast. It's 3-0 Florida. This is like the most boring finals we've ever seen. And then all of a sudden, Connor McDavid just flips a switch. And before you know it, the series is tied 3-3. Game 7, Florida's got a bunch of injuries. They look like they've lost all the momentum. Edmonton's gained all the confidence. And you're kind of expecting like a blowout, Edmonton winning Game 7, only to lose. So I thought I would get a total kick out of the media just going crazy over it. I think it's hilarious when stuff like that happens. But what's actually happened is everybody just stopped caring about it. Now all the talk is just on the draft and free agency and stuff. So it is what it is. I think if Edmonton won, that's all people would be talking about, but they're just choosing not to because it doesn't fit their interest, I guess. And of course, most of the hockey media is going to be Canadian. So it is what it is. I didn't really care who won or who lost anyways, but my bracket is officially incorrect. I really thought Edmonton had it, and I did pick them to win, obviously. So it is what it is. I'll probably pick them next year. You kind of have to. But yeah, that's where we're at now. So we shall see. Either way, it's a fun sport to follow, and I think I just have such an appreciation for it. I think it's incredibly fun to play. They're some of the best athletes out there, and a lot of them are good people too. So like when I was a kid, I think there were some good role models and whatnot of just kind of stay quiet, stay humble, but work as hard as you possibly can. Where'd those 25s go? Oh, they're behind the camera. So this will be the little back offset here. I just do 3.5 plates, so it's overall more stable feeling. And there's something kind of nice about like a moderate to high rep set for the traps, for the scapular retraction. It's like it just ensures that you're getting a full range of motion for those muscles. And you don't have to worry about things like the rear delts, elbow flexors, even the lats trying to steal the show there. So this is a great lift for a top set, back offset approach, in my opinion. Back offset on T-bar rows up next. Technique is going to basically be exactly the same on this. The cool thing about the back offsets is you can, what I like to call it, just like getting in the groove. So you can get in the groove with lighter weight when it's not very challenging at all. You can basically choose your technique because it's not so heavy to where it's forcing you into a specific movement pattern. You choose what to do, and then you can kind of fatigue your choice of technique from there. So I don't necessarily need that because I still have, obviously, my desired technique with the heavier weight. But for this machine in particular, it's just much more stable with lightweight. So a bit of a different use than what I just mentioned for me specifically here. But that approach is pretty useful on a lot of lifts. So let's get this, and then we'll hit some power shrugs. And then your upper back is just absolutely toast after that. My God. Oh, all right. Speaking of upper back being toast, yes, we do have power shrugs. We're not going to think about that. I'm just going to set it up. All right, let's get this thing out of the way. Oh, and I didn't mention it at the start, but one thing I want to do with this series, I want to make it more interactive. Obviously, there's a bunch of time I have between my sets, so I can go over all sorts of different topics. Have time to touch on some more fun stuff like hockey and whatnot. So if you have any questions, this is basically kind of like a more fun Q&A. Not that people don't like Q&As, but if you look at like the views on the Q&As on my channel or any other channel, it's very clear that people don't really like to watch them. So I think they're useful for very, very like niche questions. I'd say it's probably a better fit just to sprinkle them in videos like this instead of like dedicating time and energy to a Q&A that like most people just simply don't care about. Not that I'll stop doing Q&As entirely, because I'm not here to just like make stuff that gets a bunch of views. I just want to have fun and make sure the people that support me actually get content they want, and it's not just like, I'm not saying I would ever be lazy with a Q&A, but I think a lot of people just dislike kind of boring content that's maybe 80% stuff they genuinely don't care about. Maybe 20% questions they do kind of like. All right, so asterisk and the T-bar rows. What a nightmare to track. So power shrugs. I'm going to go 2 sets at 3.5 plates. So we'll talk a little bit about power shrugs here. Power shrugs are an interesting lift because just like some of these other lifts I've been talking about, so the first 2 things I did, which is is this cutting me off? This screen is like so much smaller, it's so hard to see where it's aimed. And then it's on the side and you have to like flip it. Yeah, this does not look good. This is going to take some getting used to, guys. My apologies. There we go, maybe that looks better. Then I have to like flip it around again so I can see if it's good. I don't know. Hopefully good enough, whatever. So for power shrugs, this is another one of those lifts, comparable to the first 2 I did, which would be the single arm hammer strength pull down, T-bar rows. It's a nightmare to track. And what I would suggest is, if you feel comfortable tracking your reps or prefer to do that, send it. Go for it. If you prefer just to track your weights, that's totally fine too. This is a lift where I could get good, clean, full reps with like 2.5 plates and it would feel good. I could also probably do over 4 plates. So it's like, all right, that's a very big spectrum to work with. So how do I make sure I'm going heavy enough to actually get adaptations? And how do I make sure I'm not going so heavy to where like I'm just using the leg drive and I can't do anything with my traps? And this is where the concept of the technique reset comes into play. So what one approach you can take to a lift like power shrugs, and I'm not going to say this is always the best thing to do, but I think one good approach to take just for when you're starting to feel out this movement is keep adding weight regularly. Like add 10 pounds every week, or do like a big jump, like 20, 30, 40 pounds every month or something like that. And just keep going to where you can feel that it's too heavy. And then you can kind of work back, because now you have an understanding of what you can do and what you can't do. Because if you go too heavy on power shrugs, like nothing bad's going to happen. It's not like you're getting pinned on a bench or a squat or something, or like a deadlift where you can't lift it off the ground. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's like worst case, your form just kind of sucks. And then you can kind of work back and figure out that sweet spot of, all right, how heavy can I go with keeping my technique in check to where I want it to be? And that's a really good place to be in for finding that sweet spot of your working weight. And then you can kind of just slowly increase weight as you feel like you're starting to master the weight that's in front of you. So it's a much different approach, I would say, than most lifts, of course, but it's just one of those funky lifts where the range of motion is an absolute nightmare because it's just scapular elevation then depression. I'm such a routine person with like what plates I put on for each lift and whatnot that I deep down I knew something was wrong or like off by putting these plates on first, where usually I do the gray ones. It's so weird. I swear it's because I was a hockey player, and you turn into such a superstitious person when you play hockey. So I think part of the psychology behind that. So I was a goalie, and luckily I stopped getting taller when I was like 14. So I could never make it to like the NHL or anything. Not that I have the skill for that anyways. But one thing with the psychology of, I think, a sport like that is you have to feel in control of something. So you get into these weird rhythms, you get into these weird superstitions where if you're playing any other sport, so even if you're playing hockey, but if you're, say, a defenseman or a forward, so much is in your control that you can kind of just rely on you playing well and you making good decisions. But when you're a goalie, it's not decision making, it's instincts, and it's reactionary. The entire game is reactionary. There's small decisions like, do you cover the puck, or do you pass it to a teammate, or like, do you go get the puck behind the net? But those are minor little details. When you have someone coming in on a breakaway, trying to dangle around you, like you're not in control. You are reacting to what the shooter does. When someone shoots it 80 miles an hour at you from 15 feet away, like, you're not thinking like, what should I do? It's like, no. You have to rely on your reaction. So you get into these weird rhythms, like what skate you put on first, what your pregame snack is, all these strange kind of things. And then when you go out of that routine, it now messes with your head. So you try and cling to these little things that bring you sanity. And I think that's why if you were to meet like a pro goalie or something, they're all pretty quirky people. And it's weird because I never made it pro, and I'm still just like very weird. That might just be a coincidence, though. Good. All right, so 3.5 plates. Where's the rest of these boys? There's that. And then I need some clips. These things will come flying off. Oh yeah, for preachers. As a couple road to, well, no, that's kind of sad. I can't really say that anymore. Unfortunately, I have 18-inch arms now. So a couple arm training updates since the Road to 18-inch Arm series. For preacher curls, I just hit 5 plates for the first time. 5 plates on preacher curls. No, that does not mean 495, unfortunately. But it does mean 5 10-pound plates. And the bar is 20 pounds. So that means 120-pound preacher curls. The range of motion was not ideal. I filmed it, and it was either 5 or 6 reps, but my form was not what I wanted it to be. So I'm probably going to stick with that weight and try and get either 4 or 5 reps next time with better depth. So that's another huge plus of filming your sets. When you're doing preacher curls, especially with a narrow grip, you can't see the angle in your arm at all. You're looking dead on your arm just like this. So you can't tell, like, that looks like a full lockout, but if I was to twist, there's still a good bend there. That's the full lockout. I'm not saying you have to go all the way, but you have to kind of pick what range of motion you want to kind of standardize, and I did not meet my own standards. So there's that. JM presses, I'm actually doing this today, so I'll touch on them later. But basically for JM presses, hit 2 plates for, I might have hit it for 7. It was either 6 or 7. I think I've done it twice. I hit 6 one time, 7 the other time, which is 240 pounds. So that's, if we're talking about signs of growth, 240 for 7 on a JM press. I mean, I used to, that wasn't far off from like my actual bench press back in the day. So my triceps, I at this point I can say I don't have good tricep genetics. There's really no denying that. At some point it's better to just accept the reality and work around it. And I think that's how I stumbled upon JM presses in the first place. If I was to just be like, oh, I have good genetics, I can train how I want, I would stay small. But if I accept, like, you know what, I can't get away with that, I don't have the world's best tricep insertions or muscle bellies, I'll find other ways to kind of make up for maybe the lack of genetics, I guess. And then if you take that mindset, like, maybe I don't have the perfect gift for this muscle, let me think about it a little bit more. Then if you do stumble upon a strong point, that muscle blows up. And I think that's what's happened to my biceps, where I think I do have pretty good bicep genetics. And when I take a really nice approach, like I have been for a while now, I think that's why you're seeing good bicep gains over the last year for me. All right. Let's get it. Working set. Forceful leg drive. Shrug with the leg drive. Lock the hips and knees. Control into the stretch. You don't have to hold it forever. You don't have to pause forever. Just pause for a second. 1 rep at a time. Those are my top cues. I run those through my head every time. I don't really need them anymore, but it's always a good reminder. All right. It's a great lift. If I can talk about any lifts that are underrated, power shrugs would be in there. Power shrugs, Smith JM press, preacher curls, all of those lifts. They're all so underrated. They all are founded in logic and reasoning, and they all have a purpose behind them. They all develop muscles that are absurdly underdeveloped in what I would say like most mainstream influencers. If you look at those guys like the aesthetic bros and that kind of stuff, like they'll have insane delts because that's all they care about. Lats. Legs are hit or miss, depends on the person, but that's pretty much it. They really just care about V-taper. So when you hear those guys try and give like trap training advice or arm training advice, you can tell they don't really train those muscles. Maybe they do, but they just go through the motions. And that's why I think spider mode and having small arms and being a traplet, that's why I think it's so common. Because when you get your advice from guys like that clearly haven't really walked the walk in those muscle groups, it's just straight up bad advice. And things like, while just doing a straight set with strict technique for your delt work, for like your overhead presses, for your pressing, for your chest and whatnot, that stuff works fine. It's just not really the case for your arms or for your traps. Strict technique with straight sets it's low fatigue, low stimulus. It's all short biased. And it doesn't work. Past a certain extent. So things like preacher curls, Smith jam press, power shrugs, those all apply the principles that work really well for chest or for delts or for legs. It applies all those same principles that people know but don't understand, and it applies them to muscle groups like the biceps, triceps, and lats. I mean traps, not necessarily lats. I think that's key for growing those muscle groups just like anything else and developing a complete physique. And I think if you look at a physique like myself, I think I reflect that, where I wouldn't really say have a specific strong point. Like, maybe my biceps, but like, I've good delts, good traps, good chest, good arms, good lats, bad legs. Like, half kidding there, but yeah, my legs do kind of suck. But I have a balanced physique, and I think if you look at the aesthetic guys, well, they might have super aesthetic physiques, and they look great. I'm not denying that, but they clearly have small traps and small arms. And I think if you're someone that doesn't have the genetics or just the skeletal structure to be able to just look like that, because realistically, those guys, they are pretty gifted. I think for the average person, having just a well-bounded kind of, did I say well-bounded? Well-rounded kind of balanced out physique is kind of the way to go. If you don't have any weaknesses, you're not going to look small. And if everything's kind of balanced out, you'll just look much bigger than maybe you actually are. And I think that's a strength of the approach that I take to training. So, no back offset here. This is just going to be two sets on this weight. The reps were high enough to where even if I lose 5, it's still a good rep range. Usually I like to get about 10 reps with very solid technique, and then maybe another 4 to 8 with good enough technique. So I usually do go pretty high reps on this thing. And then much heavier on rack pulls, which complement this, which I do on Wednesdays. Rack pulls are the truth, man. It's such a good lift. I can't believe our boy put it in F tier. Sad. But it is what it is. I'm gonna go one more wrap on the straps this time, actually. Started to slip a little last time. There's no knurling on these handles. I'm probably the only person that bought these things for power shrugs. I think they're just used for like jammer presses and that kind of stuff. Alright, let's get it. That's all I got. That's it for me. Alright, so that's a good hard set on power shrugs. Up next, gonna be some reverse pec deck. So let's hop into some reverse pec deck, and then let's talk about arm specialization a little bit. While I'm out of breath, I'm actually going to do a little cleanup. So let's see. When it comes to arm specialization, I'm going to talk through this one a little slow for no particular reason. So with arm specialization, it's overrated. And if you don't understand why I say that, it might be a little bit confusing. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need to specialize in arm training to get them to grow at a fast rate. The reason your arms have not been growing at a fast rate up to now assuming you've been following a suboptimal program or just training approach in general, the reason your arms haven't been growing in most cases, or in a case where everything else is growing except your arms, it's usually because you're treating your arms like they're a completely either just different muscle than everything else, where maybe this is a popular approach where everyone's like, oh, you gotta go heavy on the big three, go heavy on your presses, and then complement it with pump work for the arms, stuff like that. Like, just pump away, get a good arm pump, you know, that kind of BS. That will keep your arms small, because you're just focusing on the wrong thing. The pump does not drive muscle growth. It's a good feeling, but it does not drive growth. I would also say, if you're treating your arms the same as any other muscle group, that can be good in some cases, but in other cases, you're viewing it incorrectly, which I kind of touched on probably 10 minutes ago here. If you train your arms like, all right, I grew my chest doing sets of barbell bench from 6 to 8 reps. If you just say, all right, well, I'm going to do barbell curls for sets of 6 to 8 reps, that'll be fine to an extent. But the problem with this is a bench press is length and biased, and it's incredibly stable. A barbell curl is mid to short biased, and it gets increasingly less stable as you go heavier. So when your arms start to get big, the lift gets worse and worse. Versus the bench press, nothing changes, no matter how big you are. Fundamentally with the lift, at least. Of course, the programming approach will have to be a little bit different as heavier weights start to beat you up a little bit more, but that's all besides the point. So, if you treat your arms like they're the same as any other muscle group in your body, legs, chest, lats, all the muscles that people care most about, that's a kind of a problem. But if you treat them as a muscle group that's completely different, I also said that's a problem. So I'm a hypocrite, right? No, well, I would say the reason I'm not a hypocrite is because you have to take the same approach to your arms that you would to any of those other muscle groups. So if you were to say, all right, well, benching, this is terrible view. I'm so bad at being a YouTuber, my God. If you take that same approach, like, all right, well, 3 sets of 6 to 8 and add weight as fast as possible worked for me at bench, it's going to work for me for curls and triceps, pushdowns. You're looking at it too literally. You're not looking at why you're doing that. Why are you doing bench press for chest? Why are you doing 6 to 8 reps? And how can you make that same concept apply properly to bicep training? Well, the reason lower reps work better on bench is because it's stable and your form doesn't change over time. When I say low reps, I'm talking like 6 to 8, 5 to 8. I'm not talking like 1 to 3 or any of that stuff. So what do we need for biceps? Length and bias lift, stable lift. What does that mean? It means preacher curls. So you do preacher curls for 6 to 8 reps, and you get 18-inch arms. And obviously that's I'm half joking when I say that. It's a gross oversimplification, but it's thinking outside the box a little bit, and it's not looking at it too zoomed in and too literally. You're taking a step back and saying, all right, well, why does this basic conventional training work for the chest? How can I get that to work for the arms? Well, you apply how your chest gets trained, so length and bias very stable, and apply that to the biceps, and sure enough, it works. And ultimately, that's what's most important. And of course, once you have that setup, you have to train hard and push either close to failure or to failure, and then you can grow. But it's having those kind of cornerstones set up first for you to be able to execute what you need to on top of that. So, hopefully that makes sense. I talk about a lot of the same stuff in these videos. I know they're fairly repetitive, but sometimes I like to expand on topics that I've already touched on. And a lot of the time, I like to just kind of attack things from kind of different perspectives, or word things a little bit differently. I just find that, like, personally, if you tell someone to focus on progressive overload for example, versus explaining to them why progressive overload works, or how progressive overload works, or how to view progressive overload, you're being told the same thing, but you're approaching it a different way. So you can tell someone something, but all that matters is how that person interprets it. And ultimately, that's what changes everything. So that's why I like to kind of expand and go a little bit deeper on these concepts and almost kind of like repeat the same topics from and attack it from different perspectives. I think it makes a fairly big difference. So, you know what? I will do a warm-up set. My inability to multitask put it on my working weight. It's also funny, I got a handful of comments on that last video, or at least on my last pull day vlog, where people were talking about this like kind of like short biased reverse pec deck actually works. It worked well and it felt really good for him. And I'm just glad that's the case, because I think for me personally, if I go into a super deep stretch or like sit on it sideways, it feels unstable. It's trying to twist me. I feel like my traps are taking over versus where I train in the short position. I feel like I have more control over my scaps and my traps, so I can lock them into place and just focus on the rear delts from here without getting too much scapular movement. So I just wanted to say, anyone that left those comments, I did see them, and I'm glad it paid off for you. Now it's just about repeating that over time and watching them grow. So let's get to it. We'll do a working set, and I got a few more questions in the comments I want to cover too. So. All right, that was sickening. I feel bad for this shirt. They're going to be popping out pretty soon. And I'll track my reps like every other time on this, just to have like a general idea. But I also just like to go hard on them every other week too, or every other session. I do them twice a week, and just get just go hard and just push it out without having to worry about tracking reps or anything like that. I find it's a tad bit of a distraction sometimes on a lift like this. So let's see what else we got. Next question. Not a question. Oh, no, it is a question. I didn't log it as a question. Somebody did ask. I usually like to write down the names, but I forgot for this one. It kind of just popped in my head last minute. Somebody did ask, will you do a leg workout for this series? Very straightforward question. As of now, I don't plan to. That's for one specific reason. It's because I do my leg days in a commercial gym, and I'm not going to be the guy that's walking around with a tripod talking about my leg days at that gym. It's just too busy, too much going on. I don't want to be that guy. So once I do, and I do plan on this at some point, switching my leg days back to the home gym here, I do plan on doing that. But I think for now, where I train my legs at the commercial gym and my leg days are super low volume, they're very much so on maintenance. There's really just not a whole ton of exciting stuff to talk about, not a whole ton of exciting stuff to see, aside from how incredibly strong my legs are. Other than that, it would just be fairly boring. So not a whole ton to go over. It's very much so just maintenance work. I'm on a push-pull legs, push-pull splits. Only one day of leg training per week. Not very exciting. Although you could say I do rack pulls on that day, and those are pretty cool. I think they're pretty fun. So maybe when I do them in the home gym, I'll increase my leg training a little bit and actually make that into a bit of a series. So an actual question from somebody. Let me do my set first, then we'll hop into it. I don't want to rest forever between sets, especially a lower fatigue lift like this. 2 minutes is fine. That is all for the rear delts. Those things are toast. Let's go. We got a fun lift up next. I'll worry about adjusting that in a sec. So up next, Smith jam press, a basement absolute classic. It's like, honestly, earlier I was talking about like going outside and enjoying like the kind of the stupid outdoors, but it's like no sane person would rather be outside on a sunny Friday in June. Nobody would rather do that than do Smith jam press in a cold, dark basement. This is like it's way more fun. And if you think about it, it's like, would you rather be outside now with tiny triceps or outside later with croissants? The problem with that is later never comes because your triceps could always be bigger. So as I load up some weight, do my warm-up sets, I will answer this question. So to read the question off, and this is where I feel like so old sometimes on here. I feel like a boomer. Like, I'm looking at the people that leave comments, just members of the lifting community here. Since YouTube does the handles now instead of like the actual just like names without the @ symbol, I have such a hard time like figuring out like what the names read because there's no spaces in them, obviously. So this one, it's from Bo PR. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but basically, Bo PR asks, do you even train the long head of the tricep? How do you prioritize the lengthened position? So this is a very unique question because there aren't any conventional lifts out there that train the long head of the tricep in the lengthened position. People will say the overhead extension is a lengthened biased lift. It's really not quite lengthened biased. Like, obviously the long head of your triceps at its shortest position here, and when it's overhead like this, and your elbow's fully bent and your shoulders fully extended like this, or flexed, this is the longest your long head of the tricep will get. The problem is there's no lift that puts max tension at this point when the bar's in your hand right here. Max tension, when your arm is fully overhead, will be right about here. So that's only just about 90 degrees of arm bend. You need max tension in this position with your arm overhead. So what you would have to do, in theory, is basically, if we're just going to keep it to free weights to keep it simple, you would have to lie face down, like on the floor, and then do like overhead skull crushers lying flat like this. So if I'm like this, and as you can tell, I have terrible mobility. It's from my giant muscles. If I'm like this, my arm's all the way up overhead, and I'm lying down with this part of my arm and my stomach on the floor, I would have to take a bar and do this. So this would be basically perpendicular forearms to the ground, so there would be no tension, and then tension increases as I go down. I'm not going to try that, especially in my basement gym that's been flooded 11 times. I don't know what's on the floor here. It's not actually that bad, but I'm not lying down on the floor. Sorry. But this lift, the JM press, it gets you into that deep elbow bend, but it just doesn't lengthen the long head entirely, just a little bit. The long head actually won't contribute much on the JM press. It's a biarticulate muscle, so if your elbows and shoulders are bending simultaneously, the long head won't actually move very much. Because basically, of course, the degree of change of your shoulder is going to be 90 degrees, and the degree of change from your elbow is going to be 150 or whatever it is. About 150. Sorry, I talked about how I failed English. I pretty much failed math too. Since you are shortening the long head at the elbow, but you're raising your shoulder, you're lengthening it there. So you're kind of just pushing it back versus the lateral and medial head lengthened and then fully shortens. So if I can put it, hopefully that explained it in a simple enough way. So we'll jump up to 135, which people are always going to ask this in the comments. My Smith machine does not have counterweights, so the bar on here is 60 pounds. So this is actually 150 pounds, not 135. So I'll do a few reps. And when you've been doing JM press for 2 years, your elbows are pretty much bulletproof. So 150, kind of easy. I say let's do some body weight work here. Let's go 240. So 1 plate to 2 plates. And yeah, I mean, it's like when your triceps get big, they'll get strong. Like that's why I'm doing so much weight on this. It's not because like I just completely chase strength and I just have like I'm like hyper specific doing all these 1 rep maxes, trying to sacrifice technique and like shift the bar down, turn it into more of a press. Like all those little things, it's all short term to feel good about yourself, to check off little box on the program. What I'm doing is brutalizing my triceps, brutalizing it, getting as much elbow bend as I can, pushing these as hard as I can safely, and then once I'm above my low end of the rep range threshold, slap on more weight. Keep it challenging. It's a very stable lift. It's hard to cheat your technique. So this is a good example of a lift where you can be pretty liberal with adding weight. It's not as stable or locked in as something like a preacher curl, but this is pretty much the best it gets for triceps. So I'm going to take a sip of this Body Armor, new sponsor from them too. And then let's rep out some of these JMs. Oh. All right, let's get it. One little cue for these. I try not to focus on where I am on the bench. What I do is I like to bring these down to the chin. So what I found is with this, if I just look to the side, I have to make sure my eyes are lined up with where I rack the bar. And that makes sure my chin is then lined up with the actual barbell itself. I don't know why I tapped this. The barbell's a couple inches behind that. So let's get it. All right, 8 reps. I might not have the biggest triceps. Definitely don't. I still think I probably have the smallest triceps in YouTube fitness, but, well, within reason. But they might be the strongest. They genuinely might be the strongest. And that's where, if you compare yourself to other people or chase strength too much, that's where you run into problems. Where what I did was like, oh, well, I'm just gonna, if this guy's massive and he benches this much, I'll just chase that bench and I'll look like him. It's just not as simple as that. It's a fine approach to take to like get the ball rolling, but it's a very short-sighted. And I'm sure there's guys that have much bigger but also much weaker triceps than I do, and that's where you have to factor in, one, the quality of your training, but two, also just kind of genetics. Genetics isn't something I'd worry about until you're like this is for reference. I've worried about it in the past, genetics. When I was following like the mainstream and Greg Doucette and those guys like years back, I was like, oh, I don't have good genetics, so I'm at my natural limit. Like everything, all the things that 20-year-old kid needs to hear, right? So back then, I was worrying about genetics and they weren't an issue, and I'm just kind of getting to that point now where I'm like, kind of starting to realize like some realities, some truths and whatnot about just bodybuilding genetics and how it works. And honestly, like, even if you have like genetic weaknesses or whatnot, if you've like proven to yourself that you can grow that area or grow that muscle, just like obviously to a noticeable extent, before you really think of or worry about genetics, you just feel so much better about your accomplishments, and you have such a good sense of controlling things that may be outside of your control, is what I'm trying to say. So like if someone told me I had bad bicep genetics when I started lifting, like I guarantee you my biceps wouldn't be as big as they are now versus what the reality was, which is I didn't know what genetics were when I started lifting, and they got to a good size within a few years. Nothing crazy, but I proved myself that I could grow them, and then at that point, if someone told me I had bad or good genetics, it wouldn't really matter because I had already built the belief in myself that I could grow them simply by just growing them. All right, so I'm going to do one more set here, and then I got one set per arm on a single arm push down. I've just been changing things up after hitting 18-inch arms. I just want to give myself a bit of a mental reset since I achieved I wouldn't say a lifetime goal, but a long-term goal. So I'm experimenting a little, changing some things up, and giving myself a bit of a break where if the experiment doesn't work and my arms plateau for a little bit, I still know what does work, and I still prove to myself that I can grow them through a certain method. So just having some fun here. And JM presses, I could not take them out. No shot. All right. Next set, let's get it. All right. Hopefully that angle worked out just fine. I never really double checked that. So I think I got, what was it, 7 on that? I didn't even really track. I think it was 7. So one more set for today. It's going to be the single arm pushdowns. I'm going to do the, what arm do I feel like doing first? I guess it doesn't really matter. Do the left arm. Just got to get this thing set up. So I'll set this up, do this set. And this is, you've probably seen me do a set or two of this on the road to 18-inch arms, that final episode. I'm just having fun here. I'm messing around, experimenting a whole ton. I'm doing basically a mechanical drop set where I'll do strict straight set like this, and I'll do some bent forward, just kind of like skull crusher, JM press type reps. I'll get some momentum in there and really just do cheat reps. And my triceps are smoked after that. I did want to touch on one more comment here. So, there was one more topic I wanted to talk about for Bo PR's comments. So, training the tricep long head, these pushdowns, any position or any tricep movement where your shoulder does not change position throughout the lift, basically any lift where your upper arm is stabilized and locked in place, it will train the long head. And the resistance profile is dependent on the lift. How lengthened your long head of the tricep is when you do the lift depends on where your shoulder is. Longer, longer, longer up here, shorter, shorter, shorter as it comes back to down by your side. So You can get your arm up head all you want. It does not mean you're training it in the lengthened position. You're just lengthening it prior to the movement. The resistance profile has a very big say. I would say the biggest say in the equation there. So last question here from Mathesis. Again, I have no idea if I'm saying that right, but I'm trying my best. Interesting question. So for a home gym, would you do a Smith machine and an adjustable bench, or would you do dumbbells and an adjustable bench, or would you do barbell and a power rack? Let me get this thing set up. So the first one he's saying, would you do, what was the first one again? Smith machine and an adjustable bench. So if we're talking just these two things, and I'm just gonna keep it to this, assuming you have no room or money to expand, I would say a Smith and an adjustable bench is nearly a complete option, but it isn't quite a complete option. And the reason for this is because there are a lot of good things you can do with a Smith machine and an adjustable bench. You can do any press variation. You can do all sorts of row variations. With a Smith machine, you can rack the bar high and you can do pull-ups. You can also do squat variations. You can do a Smith hack squat. You can do RDLs, power shrugs, hip thrusts. JM press in the Smith machine is huge. I absolutely love that. You can do AD press, all sorts of stuff. You can basically cover everything. You can also do very, very stable calf raises this way. So if you care a lot about the triceps, if you care a lot about the calves, and then just the whole body in total after that, the Smith machine and the adjustable bench is an excellent option. You can also do like chest supported rows, putting the Smith bar beneath you. And that will feel pretty good too. I haven't experimented a whole ton with those, but I would assume it's a fine option. If you talk about dumbbells and adjustable bench, this will be maybe a little bit more cost friendly. However, you're also more limited because dumbbells are less stable, and while you can do in total more variations, they're going to be watered down a little bit for various reasons. So if you're talking about like training your legs, you're just not going to be able to go heavy enough on them to match the growth that you get. So if your legs do end up getting to like early intermediate, late beginner, you've pretty much maxed out dumbbells for like the most part, at least for optimal growth. So that's not a very good option. You can do flies now. You can do lateral work, you can do curls, all that kind of stuff, which the Smith machine does not allow you to do curls, and that's by far the biggest downside to just having a Smith. But dumbbells, they're going to be much, much more limited, in my opinion. A barbell and a power rack, this basically allows you to do anything that a Smith machine allows you to do, except for the stability. So each lift is going to be probably marginally, quote unquote, worse for hypertrophy, at least for a stimulus to fatigue ratio. So if you're an intermediate or advanced guy, probably not as good as a Smith machine in my opinion. So every leg movement you do will pretty much be axially loaded versus a Smith where you can do a hack squat and there's really no tension on the back. But you can pretty much do everything Smith does just without the stability. The one plus to a barbell is you can do barbell curls. So obviously that's going to be pretty big if you care about biceps at all. And then, yeah, so for the power rack, obviously with this, you can get attachments for the power rack, but I said I wasn't going to talk about other equipment. But either way, with the power rack, you can set the barbell up high and do pull-up variations from that. So they're all pretty good options. Personally, I would opt for the Smith and then probably just get an easy bar or something on top of that. All right, for whatever reason, this battery's about to die and the memory card's out, which doesn't make much sense, so I'm just going to do my sets. I appreciate all of you guys watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Ugh.